What are the most shocking moments of the 2025 NFL Draft? Hey guys, it's Joshua Klein, your host of the Draft Beard podcast. Thank you guys so much for joining me tonight. We're going to go over the most shocking moments of the first 2 days of the NFL Draft. That's rounds 1, 2, and 3. But before we get there, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this podcast. I really do appreciate it. It helps get this content to those who are most interested in all things NFL, NFL Draft, and maybe sports related. So once again, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, and don't forget to hit that notification bell. That way you do not miss a single episode of the Draft Beard podcast. So tonight, we're going to go over the most shocking things that happened in the first couple of days of the NFL Draft. Definitely been some big stories in this year's draft, and a few of them are really, really, really shocking. Big stories we did not expect to happen. And the first one happened right at the front end of the draft, as we had the shocking trade between the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Cleveland Browns. You had about 30 to 15 minutes before the start of the draft, you started getting some word out there from NFL draft media that the Browns and the Jags were working on a trade, and boy, was it a doozy, as the Jacksonville Jaguars ponied up their 5th overall pick, so they moved up 3 spots from 5 to 2, and they also sent a second-round pick, 36 overall, a 4th-round pick, 126th overall, and a first-round pick in next year's NFL Draft. And they ended up sending back, they ended up getting back the 2nd overall pick from the Cleveland Browns, a 4th-round pick, 104 overall, and a 200th overall in the 6th round. So the Browns picked up an extra first-round pick next year to move down a few spots and give up on what could be a generational, once-in-60-year, 80-year talent in Travis Hunter. The NFL really hasn't seen much of anything like Travis Hunter, who can attempt to play both ways at wide receiver, at cornerback. There's a debate over which position he's going to be best suited, where different teams will play him. But Cleveland gets an extra first round to, some assume, set themselves up for next year's draft class, which should be a better quarterback class, but who knows? Anything can happen over the next college football season. So Cleveland sets them up. And when we look back in history, that is going to be the determining factor. One, how did Travis Hunter perform? Does he change the trajectory of the Jacksonville Jaguars franchise? And down the road, does Cleveland get their quarterback for the future in next year's draft? It is a big risk to take for the Cleveland Browns. Again, you see this as a quarterback-centric league, and even when you have a generational talent like Travis Hunter, Cleveland got enticed enough by the draft capital that the Jags were able to give them to punt taking Travis Hunter and set themselves up possibly for next year, getting themselves 2 first-round picks. And you never know. Where's Jacksonville going to fit this year? Obviously, they were in the top 5. They've had a disappointing season. Could they be in the top 10 next year? Could Cleveland be in the top 10? So you could really set yourself up very well next year. But I think it's a huge, huge risk for the Cleveland Browns to take. And if Travis Hunter ends up being a Hall of Fame player and turns around the Jacksonville Jaguars, it just would be the thing that would be another dart on the dartboard of reasons why Cleveland is Cleveland. But if it turns out that, hey, Travis Hunter does turn out to be a generational talent, but they end up also finding a quarterback for their entire future, then that's a great thing for the Cleveland Browns. But it's super risky to do. Cleveland did end up picking up a quarterback in the 3rd round in Dylan Gabriel. I'm really high on Gabriel. I had him as my 3rd overall quarterback in this draft class. So we'll see what happens down the road. But, man, that was a shocker and completely unexpected. I don't think any mock drafts out there had Cleveland trading out of that pick, whether it was they were going to pick Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter. That also doesn't get talked about. Yes, they passed on Travis Hunter. They also passed on the ability to pick up Abdul Carter. That would have been a great pairing with Myles Garrett. But instead, they get Mason Graham. That's the other thing you got to factor in here. I'm really high on Mason Graham. I had him as my 3rd overall prospect in this draft class. So if you get a guy who can help also be a game wrecker on the inside and wreck the game along with Myles Garrett, and you get your quarterback of the future, that could work out for you. But once again, what a huge risk by the Cleveland Browns and an absolute stunner. I think this could go very well for Jacksonville. And worst case scenario, you're going to sell tickets and you get the publicity for the foreseeable future and getting a guy like Travis Hunter. Next up, the other thing that was shocking, we had another shocking trade, and that was later on in the draft as we got back towards the back end of the first round. We started to see a lot more activity, and that's what I kind of anticipated with my last mock draft I did before the draft. We'd see a lot more trading activity, and boy, did we ever. As the Atlanta Falcons, once again, 2 years in a row, kind of shocked people in the first round as they moved up from the 46th overall pick. They moved up 20 spots from the second round into the first round, and they gave up the 7th round pick, and gave the Rams a 2026 first round pick. That is huge. That is a lot to give up for moving up 20 spots to pick James Pierce Jr. And I think a lot of it, in my perspective, is the player that you're trading up for. Yes, Atlanta needs edge rushing help. They already picked up Jalen Walker, who I have my opinions on him as well. Not the biggest Jalen Walker fan. I had him in the low first round. Where's his perfect position? Is he a positionless player that's a really good athlete and leader? And then you move all the way up for James Pierce Jr., another guy who I wasn't really high on, ultra thin, disappears in games from time to time, isn't the most refined pass rusher, probably will start out his career as more of a designated pass rusher, not an edge setter. Phenomenal athlete, phenomenal speed. But to give up that kind of draft capital for that type of player, that's another risky move. And not the biggest fan of James Pierce, but Atlanta obviously is. It was kind of put out there from the draft media that they were really looking at James Pierce at pick 15. He probably was going to be their pick. Didn't expect Jalen Walker to fall. So on the flip side, if you look at it from the Falcons' perspective, if they had guys who were really high on their board, they came away with 2 guys who were high on their board that fit a desperate need that they have. I'm just not so sure that those are the 2 guys that are actually going to solve the pass rush need that the Falcons have had for years. Huge risk by the Falcons. And once again, last year they picked at Michael Penix, shocked everyone. And again, they make a shocking trade here as well. So we'll see how this works out in the future. Last year, after being really critical of the Michael Penix pick at pick 8, it ended up, so far, it looks like it's worked out for them, as Kirk Cousins wasn't ready to perform, and his Achilles injury has kind of set him back, and he got benched. So it ended up working out for the Falcons in the long run, and maybe this works out as well. Not something that I would do, but again, that's just me not being high on the players that they picked. The next surprising thing in this draft was teams that broke their tendencies. And so you had a lot of us in the mock draft world and NFL draft media out there doing our mock drafts. We wanted Seattle to take offensive line. You wanted Green Bay to take wide receivers because both those teams were desperate at needs in those particular positions. But neither one of those teams have drafted, either in Seattle's case, an offensive lineman, or in Green Bay's case, a wide receiver in quite some time. It had been 15 years since the Seattle Seahawks had picked an offensive lineman in the first round, and it was in the early 2000s that Green Bay picked a wide receiver. And both general managers broke their tendency and ended up drafting players that they don't typically like to draft in the first round. Grace Zabel, who is a great interior offensive lineman, really good prospect, probably a perfect fit for Seattle and what they need on that team. And they picked him at pick 18. And then you come down the draft board, and remember the draft is in Green Bay, and you get the Green Bay Packers announcing that for the first time since the early 2000s when they picked, I think it was Javon Walker, wide receiver. They did. They picked Matthew Golden out of Texas. What a great moment for Green Bay fans who were there at the draft. So really surprised and shocked that you not got one general manager that broke a tendency, but you got 2, and Schneider and Brian Gutekunst. Oh my gosh, I probably just slaughtered his last name. I apologize, Packer fans. But yeah, really surprising, really shocking. As for the picks themselves, bigger fan of the Seattle pick. I think Grace Abel fits more of what they need. I like Matthew Golden. I had him as wide receiver number 4. Kind of different. I would have rather seen Green Bay go with a bigger receiver, taller, maybe X type of receiver. But Matthew Golden does have blazing speed, was a breakout player in his last year for the University of Texas. Wasn't as high in Matthew Golden as some people. I still think that's a pretty decent pick. Just maybe would have liked to seen a little bit different style of receiver than picking Matthew Golden. The next big thing on the list is the big one. This is the absolute shocker of the NFL draft, and that's the whole Shedeur Sanders thing. 5 quarterbacks have been taken in the NFL draft before Shedeur Sanders. And I know there are a lot of different takes out there, a lot of different people, some of them a little absurd, playing the race card, different types of elements. I think the Shedeur Sanders thing really does boil down to one very simple, basic, really basic principle here. And listen, let's go back to Aaron Rodgers when he was coming out of the draft. He fell as well. And I think everything boils down to this scenario. If you have the talent of an Aaron Rodgers type, the ability of an Aaron Rodgers, you can live with the enigma and the personality and the ego and those different things. When you don't have that same type of elite talent, you don't deal with the enigma, the personality, the lack maybe of leadership, the lack of humility, right? The arrogance. And that's really what it boils down to in a nutshell. If Shedeur Sanders had Aaron Rodgers type of ability, all these teams would overlook all of the things that come with them because what they value most overall is winning and having really good players. But when you don't have that same type of ability, they're not going to overlook the attitude, the lack of humility, maybe some of the other things that have come along with Shedeur Sanders. A lot of this we don't know, but you got the word that a lot of GMs and teams out there were really put off of the interview process with Shedeur and not in conjunction with some of the things they saw on the field. So that's what it boils down to, in my opinion, in a nutshell, right? They will overlook your faults if you are an exceptional player and athlete. That's just is what it is. I mean, NFL teams will go and take players with major character concerns because they view you as a really elite or going to be a really good player for them. And in this case, it's really what it's come down to is Shedeur Sanders does not have Aaron Rodgers type ability, so they're not going to put up with the Aaron Rodgers type attitude. And that's what it boils down to. Do I think it's a little excessive that he's sitting there on day 3? Yeah. Yes, I do. I had Shedeur Sanders at 41 on my draft board. I know that's much lower than most others, but again, it shows the discrepancy between Cam Ward, who I had a borderline first-round grade on, and all these other quarterbacks like Shedeur, Gabriel, Howard, Milroe, Shuck. All those guys really were like second-round, early third-round grades, and when you are grading players at quarterback in those types of rankings there where they fell and where they slotted, those are really looking at backup quarterbacks. Maybe you can hit for a starter, but those aren't guys that you're viewing that you'll take the risk on higher in the draft board because you're not viewing them just as a starter at the NFL level. You're viewing them as guys who can change your franchise and be a franchise quarterback, because most teams in the NFL, that's what they're looking to do. They're looking to hit the home run franchise quarterback, because if you hit one, now you have a higher probability of winning a Super Bowl. If you don't, you can end up in quarterback purgatory. But if you're in the middle there and maybe you at least have a functional starter, that's better than being totally in quarterback purgatory. But teams will take that risk in the top 10 for elite talents. And in this case, Shedeur is not an elite talent. I don't care what Mel Kiper wants to say or anybody else. He is an average talented quarterback coming into the NFL with pretty good traits to at least be a starter in the NFL. And that was the ceiling. Decent floor. And that's why I'm surprised that he's not picked yet, despite some of the attitude concerns with Shedeur Sanders. So do I think he'll get drafted on day 3? Probably. I can't see him going undrafted. I think some team will at least take a flyer on him in the late rounds, because now you're getting to the point where the risk versus reward you're only risking a 4th, 5th round, 6th round draft pick. That risk reward is much better in terms of from the team perspective than risking all the money you'd have to pay him as a 1st round pick, or even risking a 2nd or 3rd round pick where you're probably going to at least get a starter at other positions. So it's absolutely stunning and shocking that Shedeur Sanders hasn't been picked, but I think that breakdown right there puts it in a nutshell. Don't be a jerk. I mean, and a high-end jerk on top of maybe thinking that he's better than what he is, maybe being uncoachable. Don't know. Like, these are all things we speculate. Don't be so over the top that when you have not elite talent and traits, and you'll get yourself drafted higher. That's it in a nutshell with Shedeur Sanders. So last little thing I wanted to show that I was kind of surprised, not really shocked about, and that was that the edges fell more than what I thought they would. There were not as many edges taken in the 1st round or high up in the 2nd round as I thought. I was really surprised not to see more players like maybe a Nick Scorton, Princely, Uman Yellen go in the 1st round, Mike Green go in the 1st round. I get the Mike Green situation there with some sexual allegations that he had in the past, and it's very telling that only 2 teams reportedly had 30 visits with Mike Green. That was kind of reported going into the draft. So the shock wasn't that Mike Green fell. I was just a little bit more surprised that some of the edge rushers, that there weren't more early in the draft. I think that you saw that the NFL viewed the defensive tackle class much better than they did the edge class. And you saw quite a few defensive tackles go in the 1st round, and you saw quite a few even defensive tackles go in the 2nd and 3rd round. So that was just one little thing I noticed. I was a little surprised that the edge rushing class, they weren't as high on them as well. A few players that got picked a little higher than others in the edge class. I'm surprised that Oladipo went as high as he did to the Tennessee Titans. I thought he would be more of a late 3rd, 4th round kind of guy because he's a developmental defensive tackle. But overall, a little surprised that the edge class, that those players fell a little bit. But those are my most shocking moments in storylines so far from the first 3 rounds of the NFL draft. So that does it for this episode of the Draft Beard podcast. Looking forward to going over some other of my favorite picks, least favorite picks. We'll go through each team and analyze their draft once the draft is completed. But that does it for this week's episode of the Draft Beard podcast, as we went over the most shocking storylines from the 2025 NFL draft.
The Draft Beard podcast.